In 1992, Jeep discontinued the Jeep Comanche, and ever since, Jeep enthusiasts have been asking for a Jeep that has a pickup truck bed, and Jeep just hasn't quite done that. However, in 2019, they released the Jeep Gladiator. That had the front end of essentially a Jeep Wrangler Unlimited with a rear 5-foot bed that allowed for things like dirt bikes and other equipment to be placed inside. And it was a huge hit. I remember back when the announcement happened, everybody went crazy, and it was the biggest thing on the market. And this one right here is actually one of the most special, not because it's the most expensive version, but because it's actually one of the base versions of the pickup truck, and it even has a 6-speed manual transmission. Now, to put that into perspective, there are only 2 pickup trucks on the market today that you can buy with a manual transmission, and this is one of them, with the other being the Toyota Tacoma, which just went through a complete redesign and should be hitting the markets here soon. While this technically does compete with pickup trucks like the Ford Ranger and the Chevy Colorado and the GMC Canyon, this and the Tacoma are your only choice if you want to row your own gears, of which I did a video recently asking people if we should hang on to the manual transmission, and it was an overwhelming yes. So if you want a pickup truck with a manual transmission, this is it. And so you should be going out and buying these so we can keep that manual transmission instead of shifting completely to an automatic. In this video, I'm going to show you everything that you get with a Gladiator that is on the lower end of the trim levels. Not only am I going to show you everything that you get with a base model Gladiator, I'm also going to be showing you a ton of different things, including Easter eggs that Jeep has hidden all throughout this vehicle. But before we do that, I want to thank Pierce Auto Center, who lent me this Jeep Gladiator to tell you guys all about it. If you're looking for a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram vehicle, make sure to give them a call as a thank you from me. So let's start off this walkthrough by talking about the exterior, and it looks really cool. There is nothing else like it on the market today. It has the front end of a Jeep Wrangler, including the exact same rear door as a Jeep Wrangler, which means if this does get dented, you don't have to pull a used door from a Gladiator. It actually opens up the pool, so if you want to replace this door, you can get one off of a Wrangler as well. Now, around back, you of course do have that 5-foot bed as well, which kind of completes the design. So if you are somebody that likes the styling of a Wrangler, but wants the utility of a pickup truck, this is the one to get. Now, I will say this is a polarizing design, as Jeep has been carrying this design over since the Willys MB. They've been pulling a lot of the design characteristics from that vehicle over into their newer and newer Gladiators and Jeep Wranglers ever since. I do wish they would come out with a pickup truck with a little bit more rounded design, maybe based off the Jeep Grand Cherokee. If you like this design, and I do, this is a pretty cool rig. Now, starting with features up front, I want to talk about this Willys name. Now, while this is technically a lower trim level, the Willys name is actually the story I want to talk about. So Willys, or as some people refer to it as the Willys, actually harkens back to before Jeep ever was a brand in its own, as Jeep started off more with a brand called Willys, and so Jeep has kept this name around ever since. So if you ever wonder what that means, that's what it is. Now, moving a little farther back, we do have an exposed antenna instead of having an antenna on something like the roof or even in the A-pillar. While most people would think it's probably just a utilitarian design, I actually think it's a little bit different, because these doors right here can be removed, as well as this top. So putting an antenna in one of those components isn't necessarily going to work. So they had to put a physical old school antenna on here so that you can continue to get reception even when your windshield is down and your doors are off. Now let's talk about these doors. As I alluded to just a moment ago, these are completely removable, and with these newer generations of Jeeps, it's even easier than ever. And in fact, on the inside of these doors, there is even a grab handle that you can grab when you're pulling these doors off. It actually is really easy to do. And it's just a couple quick bolts and you lift up and off the door. One thing I neglected about the exterior of this is the fact that this roof is completely removable. Now, these are the most easily removable panels. They are over top of the front seats. You can actually remove these in about 30 seconds each. However, the rear of this can come off as well, including the back glass and everything, and that takes a little bit longer and takes specialized tools, which I'll show you when we get into the interior. Finally, the front windshield actually still goes down. That is something that is carried over from all of the older Jeeps and going back into the Willys, this thing can actually tilt downwards, meaning you can go without a top, you can go without a windshield. It is a true convertible experience. Now, moving farther back, let's talk about this pickup truck bed. So this is actually a 5-foot bed. While it may sound small, and honestly it is still extremely usable for a mid-sized truck like this. And Jeep says that it fits most dirt bikes and motorcycles. So if you are looking to put something like an ATV in the back, it probably will fit. While this Gladiator may not have a lined bed, that is an option and something that you can add in at a dealer or on the aftermarket, which I personally prefer and have generally had in the pickup trucks I have owned. Now let's talk about these wheels, which I really like them. They're extremely clean while kind of having a little bit more complicated look and have a satin black finish that I think looks really great. This specific pickup truck does have Toyo Open Country AT tires, which are aggressive and should do pretty well off-road. Now let's move around to the front of the Gladiator really quick, as I want to point out one thing that is actually kind of interesting. You do still have the 7-slot grille that you have from the Wrangler and are extremely familiar with, as they've been using it for years and years. However, the difference between the Gladiator grille and the Wrangler is the fact that each of these slots are a little bit wider than the Wrangler, and that is because this thing has a tow rating, which we'll talk about when we get to the powertrain, because it needs considerably more air to be able to cool down things like the engine and transmission, because you are towing and working the engine harder. Now, I promised you guys Easter eggs, so I'm going to show you all the different Easter eggs that I have learned about on the Jeep Gladiator, starting with the wheels. Now, every single stock wheel on a Jeep Gladiator have this little MB Willys logo right here. So that is harkening back to what I mentioned right here. The Willys name is also going back to right here. Next up is actually in the truck bed. As you will see right here, there is a 419, and what that is actually the area code of where this pickup truck is built. Another good one are these flip-flops that are actually found on the passenger side of the cowl underneath of the windshield wipers. And while most people don't know why these flip-flops are actually here, it's actually referencing a car journalist, Rick Pewey, sorry if I say the name wrong, who was a Jeep fan and a veteran car journalist. And then not far away from these flip-flops is actually right here. It is on this windshield, which has another Willys MB, of which is a good reason why you should always get a factory windshield, which they probably thought about. Then another fun one is actually inside of each of the factory headlights, they have a little Jeep grille with little headlights in there, which is really cool and another reason to hang on to the factory equipment. And then while most people aren't going to notice it, right over here is your 7-slot grille that is iconic for the Jeep name. And then another good one is, if you don't pay attention to these shorter ones, there are 7 full-size bumps on the back of the bed, again harkening back to its grille, which as you can see carries over to the roof panels as well. And then the final Easter egg is actually on the interior, and that would be these floor mats, which actually are a topographical map, which is more just referencing the off-road prowess of a vehicle like this. So with that, it brings us to talking about the interior of this pickup truck, which is really what sets itself apart from everything else on the road. While every other pickup truck on the market is looking for a refined experience, and you're looking at flowing lines and big screens and all of that kind of stuff, a lower level Gladiator like this is extremely utilitarian. And that is not more evident than with the seats themselves, because these are cloth seats, which actually are really good for off-roading, as cloth seats make it so that you don't move around in your seat nearly as much as leather, and so these are actually the seats you would want if you're a serious off-road enthusiast. However, before we get too far into the interior, I have to talk about this manual transmission. As I had mentioned before, this manual transmission is one of the only 2 pickup trucks on the market today that can have it. And this is a 6-speed manual, which I think is really cool. Now, it's extremely easy to operate. It is a 3-pedal manual, so you're going to be using your clutch, and then you can easily row through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. However, it does have a reverse lockout. You actually have to pull up on this and go all the way to the left and up for you to get into reverse. What this does is makes it so it's nearly impossible to shift into reverse when you're driving forward, meaning you're not going to be damaging your transmission while driving it, even if you're not super familiar with driving manual. Next to that, you actually have another lever, which is your 2 high, 4 high, 4 low, and 2 low. Again, this is an off-road pickup truck, and having that in a physical form instead of a knob is extremely usable and honestly makes you feel cooler. Now, some other cool features about the Jeep Gladiator actually are up on the dash. dash. While this dash is extremely horizontal, it doesn't have a ton of flowing lines. It looks very utilitarian, including its very circular vents, but above that is actually this little storage bin, including a place that you can put things like a phone holder, like what this one has right now. But one thing a lot of people use them for is hooking up their GoPro and mounting it there, meaning you don't need any special equipment to make that happen if you want to record your off-roading. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, the Willys, whatever you want to call it, trim level is a lower level trim level, so you are going to get the smaller display. But if you are somebody that likes physical buttons, this is the one to get, as the smaller screen allows for things like your tuning knob, your volume knob, and other things to be a physical button instead. The dash itself is not a digital dash. It actually has a smaller screen, which is still extremely usable and is quite similar to what I have in my 2013 Ford Explorer. So if you're somebody that isn't too into tech, this is the one to get. And then the steering wheel itself, I have always really liked Jeep steering wheels. So this Jeep steering wheel is actually a 3-spoke design, which again is going back to the old school Willys MB, which had a 3-spoke steering wheel as well. And then on the steering wheel, you do have your basic buttons for things like your cruise control, and then of course your hands-free calling, but not much outside of that. Behind that, you have your stocks, which are things for your windshield washers, your turn signals, headlights, and that kind of stuff. And then to the left of your steering wheel is going to be all of your headlight controls, as well as your dash controls for things like raising and lowering the brightness of the display. Now moving below the infotainment center and above your gear selector is things like your HVAC controls, as well as a little storage bin, a 12-volt charger, and then you also have a single auxiliary port, a USB-C, which is pretty cool for a low-tech car like this, and then of course a standard USB 2. And then below all of that is going to be a little storage bin, which I think is pretty cool because on the inside of that, along with a bunch of other storage spaces in here, is kind of like it's kind of a carbon fiber look. It has a little bit of a texture to it, so it's going to hang on to whatever you put in there, and I actually really like the texture. It kind of changes things up in here a little bit. And then of course behind your gear selector is going to be your manual handbrake, which I'm not going to release because I do not want this car to move even though it is in gear, but it is easy to use, it's very close to you, and is just really nice to have, especially in a vehicle like this that's a manual transmission. To the right of that is going to be 2 different cup holders, and inside of those cup holders is actually a phone tray so you can place your phone in there. Behind that is going to be your center storage. There are actually 2 different parts of it. There's the upper storage right here, which actually has tools on the inside of it, and those tools are actually used to remove the top as well as lower your front windshield. And inside of that top storage is kind of that carbon fiber looking stuff again, and I really like the way that looks. When the light hits it right, it just shimmers and looks really nice. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. And then of course underneath of that storage is your secondary storage. Inside of there is a cavernous storage area, and inside of that is actually another USB 2.0, so you can charge devices in there without having it sitting on your seats and your cup holders and all of that kind of stuff, so it's a nice place to put that. Of course on the right hand side over here you do have a glove box and a grab handle, because when you're doing real off-roading you want something to hang on to. And moving over to the door is something that you don't actually see very often, and that would be manual windows. Yes, you roll up and down your windows. Now you might think that is because these doors are removable, but that's just not the case because the upper trim levels do have automatic windows and it's easily removable. However, having manual windows is honestly kind of cool, and honestly I kind of miss having manual windows, so something like this isn't too bad of an idea. And then above that is a very utilitarian looking latch to be able to get outside of the car. It is a kind of aluminum finish and it feels really nice, easy to get to and open the door. And then above that is a grab handle on the A-pillar. Of course, pickup trucks in general have always had this, so that's nothing out of the ordinary. Now before we move into the back seat, I actually want to talk about seating position in this, because this seat is actually extremely comfortable. I really do like sitting in it. I don't really have any issues with it. It's not really a problem. These are manual seats, so you basically pull a latch underneath to move yourself forward and then pull on a latch to move yourself backwards. It's an easy process and honestly faster and easier than most automatic seats. You do have lumbar support on the left-hand side as a knob, and then there is a manual thing for tilting your seat front and back. In the driving position, you are actually very up in the vehicle. You have a good visibility in the front, back, all the different sides. On the door itself, you do have a little net to be able to put stuff into. However, it doesn't have much form to it, so I don't know if I'd put stuff in it. But one thing that has always been interesting to me in the Wranglers and the Gladiator and stuff is you are definitely kind of cocooned into here. So this door is actually very close to you, which is nice because you have easy access for putting your arm on the left-hand side over here. And then you have easy access to your center console. So it is a comfortable driving position, but you definitely are a little bit more enclosed in here than a lot of other pickup trucks and SUVs out there. So it's something to be aware of when you're shopping for this. All right, so let's move into the interior rear of this vehicle, which is actually one of the nice things to have in here because Jeeps haven't always had back seats until the Unlimited came out in the 2007 year for the Wrangler. But what surprised me is this is a mid-size pickup truck, again competing with things like the Tacoma, the Ranger, the Colorado, and the Canyon. I actually have legroom, so I'm about 6 foot, 6'1", and sitting behind myself, I have the seat where I would sit in the front seat, and I have probably 4 or 5 inches before my knees hit the front seat. And that's partially because of this recess in the back of the seat. It gives a little bit more leg room while allowing the front to be able to come back a little bit more, which is a really good idea. Now, just like in the front, this is a very utilitarian design. It is comfortable. You have a little bit more upright of a feel to it. But on this lower trim level, you don't have a ton of frills. Of course, you do have 2 different cup holders down here. You have 2 vents, which is great to be able to easily have air going to the back of the vehicle, even a utilitarian vehicle like this. And then outside of that, there really isn't a ton. Of course, above you do have this bar right here, which they have this bar here because this roof is removed, so you still gotta have stuff in this vehicle, and this is the way they do it. So this is where they house things like the speakers, and then you have all the map lights for the front and rear sitting in this bar. There isn't a ton back here to talk about. It's comfortable. I could see myself sitting back here in a road trip and I probably wouldn't be uncomfortable. But other than things like manual windows, that's about it. Actually, while I did just say that, there is one other thing I want to mention. So this is a pickup truck, which means it does have under seat storage. You can easily just flip up the seats like that. And this is where you can keep stuff in there like your tools or extra gear or that kind of stuff. I will say this is not a lockable storage. In higher trim levels, or you can option it, there is a lockable storage you can have under here. However, this is not that. This is also where you keep all of your nuts and bolts from removing things like the top and for things like laying down the front windshield. Finally, let's talk about the drivetrain of the Jeep Gladiator. And before we do that, let's see how we get into the engine. Unlike most vehicles on the road, you actually don't have a latch on the interior to unlock the hood, and instead you actually have a latch right here. And all you do is you just pull down like that. You have one over here as well. You have this latch right here, and then you just lift up, and you have this bar right here that you just go in and prop it in there. So this is the 3.6 liter Pentastar engine. You found these in a lot of different vehicles, including the Jeep Wrangler, this Gladiator, the Dodge Durango has them, and a lot of other cars under Stellantis' ownership. However, in this Jeep Gladiator specifically, it makes 285 horsepower and 260 pound-foot of torque. Now, just in case you don't want the 6-speed manual that this one has, it does also have an 8-speed automatic choice as well. And while back in 2021, when this one was made, there were actually 2 engine choices. There were this 3.6 liter, there was also a 3.0 liter diesel engine, which was great for towing. However, that one is actually being discontinued in 2024, leaving this as the sole choice for the engine. But that's not a bad thing. I have really liked this engine. This engine also helps out in giving 1,700 pounds of payload capacity, which means you can haul a lot in the bed and quite a few people. And then its towing capacity is 7,650 pounds. Now, if you were one of those people that doesn't want a ton of tech, you don't want giant screens, you don't want all of that crazy stuff that comes in those expensive trucks nowadays, this is a fantastic option for you. It has a manual transmission, has a convertible roof, it's off-road ready, it has cloth seats, manual windows, and everything that you could want out of a truck, but nothing that you really wouldn't. If you're somebody that's looking at a full-size pickup truck, you might want to look at this. This also is at the top of the range of a mid-size pickup and has a lot of the same stuff, but in a smaller package. I really like the way these Gladiators look, so why aren't people buying these manual Gladiators? Leave your thoughts down in the comments.